Welcome to Yoga Therapy, the Alchemy of Healing. My name is Marie Pampanin. I am your host. Please make sure to hit the subscribe button if you enjoy the information that we're sharing. Thank you so much for your support. Hello and welcome, Dr. Suzie. Yeah, this is such a wonderful and joyful experience for me to be able to interview today for the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we only have a short period of time, so let's get to this.
Well, I want to thank you first. First of all, before we get started, I want to thank you so much for the honor of being here, and want to thank you for all the work you're doing, both in your own practice as a yoga therapist, as well as advocating for our field. And thank you. I was, again, flattered and honored to get to be here with you today and to support you and your listeners.
Thank you. So, I've been asking everybody to just give us a little short blurb as to how they became a yoga therapist, what was their journey. And I'm really interested in hearing about yours. So,
Well, thank you. One of my favorite quotes is from John Lennon, I believe. Life is what happens when you make other plans, right? So that's the lead in here. And sometimes things don't make sense at the time, and then they do make sense later. So, with that in mind, here I go. I was living in the Northern Virginia area near Washington, D.C., and teaching yoga and other mind body modalities, including Pilates, and really a mom first and doing these things around that. And very, very blessed. And started to have students reaching out to maybe work one on one and started doing that work and found that work really exciting and fascinating. And also getting real with myself, overwhelming because they oftentimes were coming to me with challenges in their lives that I felt like I had been trained to give them yoga poses or mind body movements, but I hadn't had training in therapeutics and healing presence and all this other important stuff that we know is just part of yoga therapeutics and yoga therapy. So anyway, I just kept showing up as best as I can without a training manual, right? And knowing intuitively when I was well out of scope and didn't call it that then, but would refer people for sure. But found myself really loving getting to know people and having this more interactive experience. So that's where it all started. And the plot twist part of it is that because the clientele I was living near and was working with ended up working with a lot of senior government officers, military officers, government officials, I mean. And when you work with people who are, either a CEO or, senior government, they're a small group. So when you work with one and they like working with you, they start to tell other people about you. And so next thing you know, that's what I'm doing, more of. And yoga therapy as a field was just getting started then. And so at the time of my work, I was pulling from a lot of modalities. So I admit I didn't pursue yoga therapy per se as a training, although shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? But I just really loved getting to know folks and helping them. And the functional problem that it seemed to keep coming back to in my work was this whole mystery surrounding work-life balance, which is a whole thing to go into, I guess. But how are people living well, and specifically, how are people who are dedicated to advancing the greater good doing pretty, you know, we're all doing big, important things in our lives. So I don't mean to be hierarchical here, but people who are really servant leaders called to serve in, pretty big ways, who rise up the ranks. How do they handle the stress of that and the loneliness that comes with that, and the unique work-life dynamics that go with that too? And so that's been a fascination of mine all along, and that's led me down some other interesting roads. But that's how it all started, was just simply one client at a time, and being blessed to be introduced to the next person and so on. But it was very almost not underground, but it was kind of how not to have a business, and everything was also around my life as a mom. So I was very careful with my schedule at the time. So thanks for
Yeah.
asking.
No, not at all. I always love hearing people's journeys, especially because you had shared that your background was in public health. Yeah.
Right, right. And that's actually, yeah, if it's okay, I'll kind of pick up from there. So
Yeah.
I, now I can stand and say I have this public health background. That actually happened because of this one-on-one stuff. So I my curiosity about the communication interaction, what I now know is patient provider communication, client, patient provider to client communication is in our space, right? The science of that actually. And also these folks that I would work with, sometimes in the very function of coming up with a home plan for them, I would say, well, you should do this at the office, this thing we've engineered for you. Well, I can't do that. It's weird. I can't be doing that at the office. And I'd say, well, you're the boss. Why, like, you get to tell everyone to do it with you. And I was kind of half kidding, half not. And so then they would say, well, you should come in and teach my team so we all know. So that's how I started doing this office yoga stuff. So anyway, so fast forward, that led me to when I decided to pursue a PhD, I decided to pursue one in health communication because it gave me this opportunity to study the kind of micro of the patient provider communication, like what should I be saying or not saying when people come to me with a hard thing or to other people, like what's the science of that? And then also the macro of how can we be communicating about these tools of yoga and yoga therapy, which are not all the same, right? How can we
Mhm.
be um, helping people to understand what it is and what it's not, and perhaps more importantly, how it can be beneficial to them. How can we promote those messages in ways that are inclusive and strategic and impactful? And so that led me to this health communication degree that looked at public health, and I
Mhm.
ended up getting to do some fun other stuff in public health that wasn't necessarily yoga, but it all just started with one-on-one conversations, and so it feels uh, it feels like that's the home base that I keep coming back to is those one-on-one connections.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely done a lot, including being a department chair of a yoga therapy program. So I don't want to mess this up, so I'm going to ask for your help. So
Okay.
we were Maryland University of Integrative Health. We are now Notre Dame of Maryland. Is that correct?
Yes, happy to help you out there. And for those who may or may not know, so Maryland University of Integrative Health, which we, say swiftly as MUIH for short, is a graduate-only institution, graduate school only, that is, having yoga therapy programs, Ayurveda programs, which I'm honored to lead as department chair of those two things. But we also have programs in coaching and nutrition and health promotion, and I'll probably get in trouble for not naming them all. So sorry, colleagues. Okay. um, and we are in the process, very honored that we're in the process of merging now with Notre Dame of Maryland University. And that is a school that's been around since the late 1800s, a small, lesser known, but amazing place that is not only graduate students, but also undergraduates. And so we're in the process of merging with them and we will be eventually, when everything continues and finalizes, the School of Integrative Health within NDMU for short, which is truly exciting to be expanding, to be staying, keeping our programs going, and to also be expanding and having more opportunities for interprofessional engagement for our students, and vice versa. We're really excited. This is something that I think, maybe 10 years ago probably wouldn't have happened.
Mhm.
And MUIH is really leaning in as the first, place for this to be happening, as I understand it. So,
Yeah.
I hope that was helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's totally helpful because one of the things that, I like to explore here on this podcast is what is yoga therapy, right? And so Yes, MUIH, I believe, is the only program that has a master's in science in yoga therapy.
Well, cool news. There are other programs now, right? We're the
Mhm.
first and only Master of Science program that's accredited. There's another Master of Science program, and at Vivekananda University, there's
Yeah.
a Master of Arts program as well. So we're seeing more in this field, which is super exciting.
Hmm.
We continue though to be the first, and to my knowledge, currently only Master of Science that's accredited, enabling our students to not only get their Master of Science degree, but to also pursue their C-IAYT credential. It means completing our
Hmm.
program as well as taking the new exam, because our field now has an exam. So it used to say it enabled one to become a yoga therapist. Now we've got to be careful with that, because anyone completing a yoga therapy program now also has to take the national exam. So anyway, so sorry to put all that, legal speak in there. I want to be careful,
No, no, no,
but it is
that's
exciting. Like,
wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah.
people have asked me, well, how's that feel for you? And I think it's great. I think it's a sign of the professional field growing, that we don't just have
Hmm.
one program, and more the merrier, let's
Yeah.
go. I think it also challenges us to keep staying, you know, in that pioneering space. And where the
Hmm.
field is today is different than it was 10 years ago or 12 years ago when it was founded. Like,
Yeah.
it's different now. So where are we going next is what I'm
Right.
thinking every day.
No, and I think that's wonderful because as an evidence-based program, like we're doing so much research and we're staying up to date on the research. And so we have the whys behind why a 6,000-year-old modality works and is so supportive of people because we are looking at the whole person. So going back into that integrative space. Yeah. So speaking of integrative spaces,
Yeah, yeah.
you are the author of a couple of books.
Yes, I am. Awkward. I guess should I talk about this now?
Yeah, because we only have a short amount of time, but one of the things that fascinated me, um, understanding, what each book was I thought maybe we could actually start with the first book that you did, and kind of work up to the new book.
Yes, well, thank you. It's you know, it's an interesting thing to be able to stand here now and say I'm the author of three books. That wasn't necessarily how the whole thing started. I wrote my first book, Well-Being Ultimatum, and its a subtitle is a strategic self-care a self-care guide for strategic healers. And so the idea was really twofold. It was to present an integrative approach to well-being protection and um, burnout recovery, really. And that was both informed by my lived experience, having felt
Mhm.
burnout and feeling shame about that as a yoga teacher, like, wow, really? I'm burned out, And at a time we weren't really having national or even local conversations about that. So I felt like I wanted to bring people into that conversation. And I also wanted to share the research I had done as part of my dissertation on the ways that communication and different well-being tools can be helpful to the burnout recovery. So anyway, so that's kind of the backstory. But ultimately, what I was trying to advance from a yoga perspective in that book, I wrote that book almost as I even thought about it while writing. It was the book I wish someone had when they walked into the yoga studio that I was running at the time, that I owned at the time. It was teaching people the philosophy of the koshas, which is one of our main integrative health models, the ways we
Mhm.
think about how we think about a person's dimensions of self, right? And not anything that I invented, something that is over 5,000 years old, something that continues to have such utility and intelligence in our life today. And so I took those koshas and I conceptually designed a program for myself, which self-treatment isn't necessarily recommended here, everyone. So, outing myself on that too. But I had been trained to develop programs in this PhD, and I started
Yeah.
realizing, what if I started exploring that for myself and created this idea of using the koshas as a way to explain why folks get burned out.
Mhm.
Essentially, those of us who are driven with passion and purpose, that the light of our inner layers gets so bright it burns through the others, and we're not taking care of
Mhm.
our mental state, we're not taking care of our energy, we're not taking care of our physical self. And so then the healing begins when we start to put a repair process together, which is so much of what we're doing in yoga therapy, right? So I
Right.
was teaching the kind of basic foundational concepts of that in Well-Being Ultimatum to the public, as a structure to go about designing one's own program for self-care, almost a strategy playbook, if you will, right?
Mhm.
Um, which is, I think, the extent we can do in a book. That's not an interactive position. Genius Breaks then was written a few years later and was really meant to distill down what I had been doing in my shtick, if I could call it that. Um, so many, when you start doing yoga in offices like I was, and starting leading these kind of workplace wellness, events, and then that led to sometimes conferences. And oh, Susie's going to come in and give us a little yoga. Like I never really shared. I actually had a structure in terms of how I would engineer those on the spot, and also use that structure in my own life. And so I call it a genius break because it's the idea of let's connect to our inner genius, which is very yoga concept from Vinyana Maya layer. Let's move through the day. Let's put some movement in there, which helps us to organize other layers too. And let's be mindful in terms of what we need to self-regulate. The self-awareness meets self-regulation. So I boiled that down as the three M's in that book: mindfulness, movement,
Mhm.
and meaning. So both of those books, just in summary, were really for the public to learn some yoga tools. My approach to them, not implying that it's the best or, the only approach by any means, but some kind of functional ways that people could adapt these ancient tools. And so then Yoga for One just is coming out this year as we're recording 2024. And that is actually a book for practitioners, which levels, takes the stakes up for me a bit, I'll be honest, but it's sharing the framework that really pulls together all of these places I've been blessed to be into a
Mhm.
process of working with people. How can we create a program that is evidence informed, that is outcomes focused, and also co-created with the client? How can we make sure that
Yeah.
we're not dictating, to be extreme, or telling the client what they should be doing, right? And how
Mhm.
can we approach the co-creation process and really partner with them? And so there's a fair amount of coaching, guidance in there, not even guidance so much as exploration. I'm more curious today about how we ask people about what they need and ask them to find the answers within themselves. I'm less concerned or even interested in telling people what they should or shouldn't be doing. So you can see,
Yeah.
even as I describe the books, I've shifted from telling people more of what they could do and going into more of how can we help people to know, how to partner with their clients, because I think that's where the real power comes in, is when you're not trying to do it yourself completely.
No, I completely hear you on that. I love that the first two books you really were exploring the this idea of koshas. Um, I was I kind of can hear what you were saying. Not kind of, I heard what you were saying. But if you were to be speaking to somebody who wasn't aware of the philosophy of yoga,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they were to be like, well, what's a kosha? How would you explain that to the layman?
Yes. And I there's a well-known breakfast cereal that I won't do a brand endorsement on, that it sounds just like, and it's like it's not that, that's nice, I won't say it, so I'll get in trouble here. But in all seriousness, yeah. So there's, I would say, kind of a couple parts to that answer. The koshas are a framework that help us to understand how we think about the way we have multiple dimensions of ourselves. They can be illustrated or kind of graphically presented to people in a couple ways. Sometimes it's like the picture of a target board, right? where if you visualize, layers, rings and rings and rings around a little circle in the middle, that circle in the middle, I'm using English translations here in 2024. The circle in the middle is the assumption that we are joy, we are bliss, we are consciousness. But around that, we have all these human experiences. We have the human experience of our I-ness, our life, our story, our life story as we're living it, the human experience of our mind, which gets attached to things, the human experience of the energy that we are, you know, both expending and taking in every day, and the energy of our human form. And so oftentimes they are depicted in this kind of layer by layer target kind of structure, even like a set of dolls with one doll inside the other, inside the other, inside the other. However, some philosophers would actually depict them very differently, almost like clouds, where there's less structure between them. There's less finite lines. Our Western minds are very connected to that left brain that wants to organize stuff. More ephemeral, more connected. You can't have one without the other. They flow in and out. And that there actually can also be conceptualized as being around the person. So less about going within us, but actually expanding us. So it's like, so too within, so too without. As we take care of these layers individually, we've got a challenge in one of them, we can't help but create a ripple effect on the others. We hear someone starts a fitness program or even a yoga practice of poses, although yoga is not just that. And suddenly they're thinking differently and their energy is happening in the day and they're feeling more connected to something bigger than themselves. The koshas would help us explain that. And so it's cool for a newcomer who maybe isn't familiar with that framework is it helps to explain it's like looking under the hood of my car. I don't understand what's going on in there, but I know my car works. Many people come to yoga, they know yoga works, but they may not know why. This philosophical system, this framework, this architectural blueprint gives us a way to start to understand some of that engineering. And as with any framework, it's meant to illustrate the mechanics of our thought and the way we think about how we think. So it's not for everyone, and it's not something we created today in yoga therapy, but it is the centralized, it's probably one of the few philosophical tools we use in yoga therapy, no matter what school we've been trained in. It's something universal to yoga therapists. So it's really powerful. And I really feel like if the public knew it, it challenges the assumption that we're putting work here and life here and, hobbies here and this kind of pie chart life.
Yeah.
It's really helping us realize that we are layers of self, and so it's important that we care for each of them. And in so doing, it's helping us to have clarity. I know it's a long answer, but the final metaphor I'll use is a coach of mine years ago who wasn't a yoga coach. Actually, she was in a totally different field, but she said, "Don't put a lampshade on your light." And I kind of think of the koshas like that sometimes because it's like, how clear is your lampshade, right? So our
Yeah.
yoga practice can be, and yoga therapeutic practice can be about trying to make those layers kind of like clear lampshades. It's not
Yeah.
about getting anywhere. It's about revealing the light that's within us. And when
Mhm.
I found it myself, it was very powerful to realize I didn't have to go get something like happiness, which is attached to
Mhm.
things. Starting with the assumption that we are joy at the center changed my life and really what inspired me to go on this path in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Loved the analogy that you used, especially when it comes to this idea of burnout. I actually just maybe 2 months ago did a cultural humility course for a company here in Marin County. And so I, did approach it through, the koshas. But,
Nice.
this idea of, say, for instance, with your first book, I think it was your first book, The Burnout, right?
Right.
Like we can't just come from it or go, try to fix it from one avenue. We have to look at everything that we're experiencing, which the way you put it, I have not seen the book, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go get the book.
Oh,
That's me being completely transparent,
yeah.
because I I know that there are so many of us that do have this passion, and that passion can absolutely just burn to the ground. So,
Right, right. Well, thank you for that. And I think that it helps explain like why is it that we get excited? You know, our purpose and our joy are coming together. And I lay out in the book the research on happiness that I did, you know, in my dissertation work was I wasn't a happiness researcher, but I had to research happiness to get to what I was trying to get to. So I went on this like happiness research detour, right? And what I came from that end is not being an expert in happiness, so let me be careful there. But I did find that it it's like the world is happy when you're showing up and doing good work. You're happy, or I'm happy, or whoever's happy, you know, when we are doing the thing that we feel called to do. We're happy when we feel like we're making an impactful difference. So you get
yeah.
all that happy, like at some point, then where are the breaks? Where's the balance? And I make this analogy of superhero syndrome, which I've heard actually used in the lexicon since then, but I kind of proposed it actually in the book, which was, um, you know, superheroes don't like have to sit down and have dinner with their kids. Like, you know, or maybe they do. I don't know. Like, I'm not a superhero expert, but like, you don't see that. Like, you see them racing off and going doing the thing, but you don't see them having to address the faults we have in our human performance system. We need sleep, we
Mhm.
need exercise, we need time with our family, we need time alone, all of that stuff, right? So anyway, I just make that case in the book, like, okay, so let's be strategic about being a healer,
Mhm.
someone who's trying to help the world somehow. That's how I define it. And that means that we've got to keep the fire, you know, like take care of it like you would with a little candle light as well as a bonfire. Like it's got to be contained, you know. So that container is how we take care of the structure of these other koshas.
Yeah.
And so thinking of it as not what makes me sad, and I'll kind of say it this way, is that I see people who have incredible gifts in the healing space, biomedical healthcare, integrative health, you know, wherever we're coming from, and servant leaders in military context, you name it, people who love what they do and feel called to do it. Like that's a pretty wide bucket, right? Or wide swatch. But what breaks my heart, honestly, is when I see someone who's called for that and it's what their dharma is, it's what they're built for, and they choose to get out of the field altogether because they don't think that they have it in them to be able to
Mhm.
continue at the pace of what it's being asked to do. And so burnout, like as a phenomena, you know, and even quoting Shanafeld, who's one of the pioneers in the space from his work at Stanford, you know, it's a systems level problem that the person thinks is their fault individually. You know, so there's also this thing I want to be careful here too. It's not just about, well, let me be getting up earlier to exercise more, let me get to bed earlier to sleep better, or let me eat some more vegetables. You know, those things will help. Um, but it is comprehensive, you know, to quote you from earlier. And so what I'm trying to advance in the book is like, hey, there's factors that are at play here that are well beyond you and I, and what can we be doing? And so I recommend in there that self-care is a piece of it, but also social support and services such as yoga therapists or other service
Mhm.
providers to not do it alone, to not think we have to do it alone, um, and to think of that as not like asking for help, although it kind of is. It's more about let me find the service provider that is actually trained to do the thing I need help with so I don't have
Mhm.
to figure it out. Which in the past, when I've done referrals with the kind of folks I was mentioning earlier, like they usually don't like to go ask for help, but they will entertain the idea of subcontracting or finding a professional who will do it for them faster, you know? So like, so that's how that's the help seeking is. Anyway, thanks for letting me expand on well-being ultimatum. The idea is that you make this ultimatum with yourself,
Mhm.
and so then part of that's about the boundaries of how we are able to do the things we get to do, because we have a certain line that we don't allow ourselves to cross within us. It's not about an art someone coming at us and making that for us.
Right. So I know we only have a few more minutes because you
Yeah,
have a big event to go to.
yeah, very
But
blessed.
the last question that I have for you is, you know, in the most recent book, Yoga for One, you know, which
Yeah,
is more for the practitioner, you know, you talk about co-collaboration, which is huge in our field because we're not there to tell somebody that, they have a disease or, they're broken, right? We're there to collaborate with them to help them resource. So if maybe you can just share a little bit about that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you again for the chance to be here. I think, what the metaphor I'll share, I shared earlier kind of like the themes from the book, the other books, but the theme here is I think when people come to us in challenging times, they're stuck, and it's almost like the metaphor of looking at your phone and you're trying to find your location, like the little GPS on there. And I
Yes.
really overuse the GPS analogy in the book. So apologies to anyone who reads it because it's like I overuse it to help us have a place to tether ourselves to throughout the book. But it's like, okay, a lot of times when people come to see us, they're really stuck on the location. What really is healing is to figure out where are we going with this and how are we moving forward. And sometimes moving forward is how am I going to breathe through this moment and move into the next hour of this day? And sometimes it's how am I moving through this time of life into what's next? Or how am I moving through the fact I can't run with my running group anymore because my knee's not working, et cetera, et cetera. Where are we going next? And so in the book, I'm trying to give folks really a strategy planning framework to help people to shift the conversation, not to deny where we are, right? Because the blue
Mhm.
line doesn't work if it's not tethered to where we are. The blue lines options show up when we think, okay, here's where I am, but where am I going? Where's the destination? Where's vis-a-vis the
Mhm.
location? And then those magical blue lines appear. Thank you, engineers, right? So I
Yeah.
feel like then in the book we're trying to give people this. I'm giving folks the structure of then what those different traffic routes look like, based on which priorities the client has. And it's
Mhm.
all really tethered with let's not assume we know what's best for the client. Because if we go back to that kosha model, their joy is within them. And so, like when a client says, I can't do yoga, I say, well, you can't do yoga wrong because it's your path within yourself. I'm actually the one that's just here to witness you as you find that path within you. I'm not here to tell you where to go within yourself. That would be all kinds of inaccuracy and wrong, leading with wrong. So I feel like it gets interesting to think about how can we be with someone as they make those inroads within themselves in a way that is helping them to not feel alone in that navigation. And I think that
Mhm.
there's a structure to choreographing the conversation that we can lean on, and that's the structure of the book is the choreography of the conversation.
Thank you so much. So I know we have a cohort 11 that's getting ready to graduate,
Yes,
and
shout out to
they will
them.
be, yes, a shout out to them, but also that they get to go collaborate with their clients. And
Yes,
whether it be one person, small group, or a larger, say, business, right?
right.
I love to point out that with yoga therapy, it is, and I think you actually said this before we even got on. There's this one-on-one piece, but it becomes global. It definitely becomes global. And so I just want to thank you for joining me today. And I look forward to hopefully having you on for round two, since we
Well,
had to do this in a short space. So
well, thank
thank you.
you. Thank you for the gift of getting to be here with you. And yes, so too within, so too without, And I think as many, have said, we really are helping each other come home within ourselves. And so I think in a time when folks need companionship, I think we have so much we can offer to folks to not have to figure it out by themselves and not
Yeah.
have to journey alone either. So thank you for all you're doing, and I
Thank
appreciate the
you.
time to be here.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. If you would like to support this content, hit the like button, subscribe, or leave a comment. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fabulous day.